Republican attorney generals are fighting back against the International Standards Organization and the credit card companies that have created a so-called gun store merchant code to try to track gun purchases. I never thought this was going to work. Now the Republican attorney generals have made that exact same point to the credit card companies, among others. Let's see what happens when we come back next. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, best-selling author, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and proud American gun owner. If you haven't subscribed to the Four Boxes Diner Second Amendment channel, please do so. We're trying to spread the word far and wide of the right to keep and bear arms. Okay, a couple days ago we talked about how credit card companies may start tracking gun purchases by virtue of this so-called merchant code for gun stores. But I pointed out to you as a practical matter, in my experience in and around Wall Street, this is probably just not going to work for them for many reasons. One of which, as you know, often the merchants, in this case gun stores, department stores, big box stores, or sporting goods stores, clothing stores, whatever. As a general matter, those merchants usually get a pick as to how to characterize themselves for the purposes of credit card processing. This is not always 100% true. Related banks that are involved certainly can have a say in this and override decisions, but often the merchants are asked, what kind of business are you in? So if the merchants say, I'm in the sporting goods business or the clothing business or whatnot, or the gun business, often that wins the day, and the banks, as long as, of course, it's not fraudulent or totally wrong or false or anything like that, generally speaking, the characterization of how you characterize your business usually is the default position that has to be overridden with some compelling evidence that you're doing something wrong or misconstruing something, number one. Number two, of course, is we all know that Americans can use cash or gift cards that they buy from the grocery store or whatever to purchase guns if they need to. That doesn't go through the credit card processing system. Again, you can always use cash and skip the credit card altogether. I know that doesn't help with certain online sales, but again, you get the point. Third but not least, keep in mind that we talked about what happened with the pornography adult film stores, the adult merchandise stores, the pornography stores in and around Times Square in New York City when Rudy Giuliani cleaned them up. And I supported Rudy Giuliani, by the way, as mayor of New York City when I was there, completely did. But with that said, just if you looked at how those XXX pornography type stores and shops responded in the Times Square area when they changed the zoning laws on them, they began basically offering general films, karate films, drinks, food, whatever they could do to basically fall within. So they didn't have to close their pornography business. They just continued it in the form of something else where they offered all sorts of other things, including but not limited to XXX products or whatnot. And many of those stores I think are still there in Times Square, though I haven't been in Times Square in a while. But you get the point. So there's a lot of different ways that this can be combated, but now yet there's another way, which I'm not surprised by, which is that 23 Republican attorney generals have just written a very strong letter making many of the points that we've talked about on this channel, specifically saying that this regulation, this de facto attempt to try to get around federal law that prevents gun registries, seems to be something that was brought about by transactional collusion, I think is what the letter says, between anti-gun forces and the ISO based in Switzerland. Remember, the organization of standardization, the International Organization of Standardization, is based in Switzerland, not in the United States. Think the globalists like guns? No, they don't. We can talk about that elsewhere, but we know they don't. At least when it comes to our guns, they like their guns, just not our guns. Okay, so the bottom line is that these Republican attorney generals wrote a very strong letter. I'll put a link to it down below. They made the point that there's no upside to any of this because any suspicious transactions or whatnot will not be flagged, and most crime, of course, doesn't occur with credit cards. What criminal who wants to steal or whatever use gun is going to buy a gun legitimately when they can buy it on the black market? Obviously, it makes no sense. Number two, they also point out, the attorney generals point out in this letter, which they wrote, by the way, to American Express, to Visa, and to MasterCard, and they copied all sorts of people like Joe Biden and other political leaders and other financial institutions, including many banks that you've heard of. They basically said that there's no upside to doing this. The only benefit to anybody associated with creating these merchant codes would be to allow anti-gunners, people with political agendas, to undercut the Second Amendment's right to keep and bear arms, to try to circumvent the law, to try to circumvent the Constitution, to take away or find ways to get information about gun owners in the gun-owning community so they can then use that against us to subvert and take away our Second Amendment rights. So I'm very happy to see these 23 Republican attorney generals have done this. I'll read the states quickly so you can see if your state's on there. It's the attorney generals from Tennessee, Montana, Alabama, Kentucky, Alaska, Louisiana, Arizona, Mississippi, Arkansas, Missouri, Florida, Nebraska, Georgia, New Hampshire, Indiana, Ohio, Kansas, Oklahoma, Utah, South Carolina, Wyoming, Texas, and West Virginia. If your attorney general is not on here, then you either live in a terrible blue state, or perhaps you should pick up the phone and reach out to them and ask them why they didn't sign this letter. Okay, bottom line is, I think this credit card maneuver is an attempt to impose international rules through Switzerland and New York on American gun owners to subvert our Second Amendment rights. I don't think it's going to work because, again, I think there's a lot of pushback here and there's some practical realities of I don't think it's going to get the anti-gunners where they want to get, but nevertheless, we should fight every inch, every time, never give up a single inch, because remember, the anti-gunners are always going to come back for more and more and more. So there is no middle ground. There is no compromise with these people because it's a one-way ratchet in their mind. They want to take over some territory legally. It's taking away our rights, and then they're going to add more and more and more, and you cannot give up a single inch. And instead, we should be fighting to try to gain ground, which I think we've been doing over the last several months, thanks to the Supreme Court's decision in NYSERPA versus Bruin, among others. And this letter from the Republican Attorney Generals. And by the way, why is there not a single Democratic Attorney General that signed this? One wonders. I guess the Democrats simply don't like guns. Not a shock, except, of course, when the guns are owned by government officials, such as their security guards and the cops that protect them as security details. Okay, we'll talk to you soon here at the Four Boxes Diner. If you haven't subscribed, please do so, and we'll see you again soon here at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.